Going under the knife to land a job, China's high beauty standards force university graduates to turn to cosmetic surgery. Weekend Business Report starts right now. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Keneal Gale. Thanks so much for joining us this week. More and more female graduates in China are being forced to undergo cosmetic surgery in order to land a job. That's our feature story this week. But before we get into that, let me toss things over to the news desk for some of the top stories BATV News brought to you this week.
Thanks, Keneal. Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Finance, Favour Williams, says an increased demand for the US dollar, that is, on the local market is causing the slide in the Jamaican dollar. Minister Williams was speaking at a post-cabinet press briefing on Wednesday. Sashana Small reports.
The Jamaican dollar opened trading today at an average of $134.05 to $1 US, a record high. Minister Williams says this is partly caused by companies that are reconstructing their US dollar debts.
We're seeing companies take a look at their debt structure as interest rates in the local market have come down, and they're looking at their debt structure because a lot of companies have US dollar debt on their books. As rates converge in the local markets, it's advantageous for them to change out those US dollar loans into Jamaican dollar loans.
She says when companies do this, they have to go into the market and buy US dollars, causing an increased demand.
But in executing these transactions, what actually happens is that the companies have to go into the market to buy the US dollars to repay the loan. And that, causes increased demand for that.
Minister Williams says that the increase in imports is also causing the dollar to slide.
If we look at what's happening in the international merchandise trade, that's our imports, we will see as well that we are importing more than we did last year. The economy is growing. We need to import more in terms of input into the production process.
But the minister is optimistic that the market will return to normal soon.
People are really buying goods and services from international markets. We're seeing the input into the manufacturing sector, into our energy sector, into our telecom sector, and that's what's causing, we think, right now in the near term that we're in this just little greater demand, but it will work its way out.
Meanwhile, as the Jamaican dollar continues to lose value against its major trading partners, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke is assuring Jamaicans that the fluctuations are normal in a free market economy. Here's more.
The finance minister says the exchange rate should not be the only thing used to judge Jamaica's economic health, and making the Bank of Jamaica operationally independent will allow the economy to better deal with the fluctuations that will happen with the exchange rate.
The exchange rate, which we have learned to focus on as a barometer of economic health, which it is not in a floating rate environment, it's just that exchange rate can be allowed to retreat to the backstage or to the back of the stage as expectations of stable and low inflation and access to a well-developed foreign exchange market remove the anxiety from the inevitable fluctuations in the exchange rate that are bound to occur in a competitive free market.
He argues that the country needs to change how it manages its foreign exchange reserves.
And if we are serious about economic independence, our relationship with our foreign exchange reserves has to mature. The size of our reserves in relation to the value of our imports determines whether we are able to sustain ourselves without external assistance. That is, in a nutshell, it determines our prospects for economic independence.
In the meantime, opposition spokesman on finance Mark Golding is expressing concern about the lack of communication from the Bank of Jamaica BOJ on the recent and rapid depreciation of the Jamaican dollar. The shadow minister says the central bank's exchange rate policy has left consumers and the business community anxious and confused. Here's Jamila Maitland with more.
Opposition spokesman on finance Mark Golding says whilst he acknowledges Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke's comments that the exchange rate is not the only indicator of a stable economy, especially in a floating environment like Jamaica, the sliding dollar does affect inflation and the price of goods. The Jamaican dollar has steadily depreciated since April. On July 26, 2018, the dollar traded at a record low of $134.49 to $1.
I agree that it's not the only measure of our economic health, but it is something which people look at and pay close attention to because it affects the pricing of important inputs, important commodities such as energy, oil, electricity, transportation costs.
Mr. Golding argues that the BOJ's lack of communication has left room for what he describes as unhelpful speculation. He claims reports are that the BOJ is deliberately driving the fall in the currency in order to increase inflation.
Inflation rate has actually been slightly negative, 0.3%. And the BOJ has a target for inflation, which is between 4 and 6% for the fiscal year. And because they're so far below their target, there has been speculation that one of their strategies or tactics to try and get inflation back within their target range is to aggressively build up reserves by buying US dollars out of the market in an aggressive way without being particularly concerned about price.
The PNP spokesman is also questioning the reason the currency is under pressure at a time when the country's net international reserve is reportedly ahead of target. Meanwhile, a press release from the People's National Party claimed that the Bank of Jamaica has bought the US dollar for 137 Jamaican dollars in today's scheduled auction.
Between May and June, we had auctions where the DOJ now scheduled auctions where they buy US from the market. And they bought at prices which moved the dollar quite significantly downward in the course of those auctions. So that's unusual behavior, given that our reserves are ahead of target, and therefore one doesn't really see an urgent need to build up the foreign reserves. So this is why I think there has been speculation.
I'll have more news, but for now, Camille, back to you.
Thanks so much. We'll have more news later, but moving on now. This summer, thousands of young female graduates in China will undergo cosmetic surgery to reshape their nose or enlarge their eyes. Competition in the labor market is so fierce that many young women are willing to change their appearance in order to improve their chances of being hired. Some even save up for months to be able to afford an operation.
She's been waiting for months.
This way, I'll show you your room.
In a few minutes, 21-year-old Zheng Tiantian will undergo an operation to give her a new face.
The surgery will make my eyes wider and I'll also get a new nose. I hope that it will be successful and most of all that it will look natural.
In a few months, she'll graduate from a degree in advertising. And according to her, changing her face will help her land the job of her dreams.
Now, recruiters pay a lot of attention to one's appearance, so this operation is what will allow me to find a job more easily.
The operation, conducted under general anesthesia, will last 4 hours and costs 4,000 euros.
What shape do you want for your eyes? Straight or rounded?
Which one is better?
The straight shape fits you well.
Making eyes appear larger is the specialty of Dr. Qian. It's a procedure he conducts 3 times a day on average.
I draw a line there, and then I'll cut along that line. Then we'll remove the muscle, and we'll sew up the eyelid.
His patients are mostly women, and they're getting younger and younger.
We have young graduates who are looking for a first job, and it's very stressful for them. And then we have high school graduates who decide to undergo a surgical operation to have a better appearance when entering university.
The operation is finished. Now, Zheng Tiantian must wait 1 month before discovering her new face. Like her, thousands of young Chinese women are going under the knife every year. In major cities around the country, cosmetic surgery offices are flourishing. Today, you have to be beautiful to succeed. The competition to find a job is so fierce, many believe being operated on helps you stand out. In this building in Shanghai, a job fair is being held. Recruiters say appearance is just as important as skills.
I think that appearance counts for 50% in the hiring process. You can ask others what they think, but for me, that's it.
This woman recruits health advisors. When choosing between two identical CVs, the deciding factor is clear.
If I have two identical profiles, appearance is decisive in my choice of hiring. A person who pays attention to their image, especially when it's a woman, means that she holds herself to high standards.
Chinese recruiters emphasize appearance to the point of sometimes discriminating against women. Rights organization Human Rights Watch recently analyzed thousands of job postings on the internet. Many of the ads specified that they were looking for young and pretty candidates.
Front desk person, 20 to 27 years old, height above 5'4", well presented, pleasant manner, please attach a photo.
3 years ago, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba even broadcast an ad presenting the so-called pretty girls of the company.
Here are the goddesses who work with us. They want you as colleagues. What about you?
The pressure to appear young and pretty can follow some women their whole career. 24-year-old Xia Xiao works as a secretary for a major Chinese cosmetics brand. 2 years ago, she underwent an operation at this clinic to make her eyes appear bigger.
Hello, I have an appointment with Dr. Xu. I think that my nose is too short and not sharp enough at the tip. What I like are straight noses.
After 2 years of working at her company, Xia Xiao is after a promotion, and she's convinced a new nose will do the trick.
It will definitely help me in my career. I think the more beautiful I become, the better my professional development will be.
The pressure to be physically attractive in order to be hireable reflects an emphasis on beauty which pervades the whole of Chinese society. Today, the country has moved far from the principle of gender equality, touted by communist propaganda to encourage men and women to serve China together.
In many aspects of society, China is still a macho country. There are a lot of companies that recruit only or mainly men. In this case, women have fewer opportunities to find a job, so there are additional requirements for them.
China's unrelenting demand for beauty is only gaining speed. Cosmetic surgery has become the fourth biggest expense of Chinese households.
Company news comes up next. Then later, Venezuela's harsh economy forces parents to make a very difficult choice. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Here's this week's company news.
JMMB Group Limited says after a resolution of its board of directors dated September 28, 2017, the company will be voluntarily delisting all its issued and outstanding shares from the Barbados Stock Exchange. The JMMB Group Limited shares will continue to be listed on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange and the Jamaica Stock Exchange. The company says the reasons for the proposed delisting include the fact that there are low levels of trading in the JMMB Group Limited shares on the Barbados Stock Exchange, and the low levels of trading in the JMMB GL shares do not justify the costs and complex regulatory requirements associated with maintaining the listing on that stock exchange. Lasco Distributors has recorded revenues in excess of $4.3 billion for the first quarter of the financial year. The company says the figures represent a 3.5% increase over the same period last year. Managing Director Peter Chin says the company delivered a strong performance for the last financial year and will ensure that improved results are reflected for the financial year. The company also announced the continuation of several of its corporate programs such as the JCF Lasco Top Cop Award and the Lasco Relief Environmental Awareness Program program REAP. REAP, which seeks to educate schools on the importance of environmental preservation through inter-schools competition for plastic bottle collection and tree planting programs, will also be renewed.
Let's now take a look at the closing numbers from the major stock markets around the world. When we come back, more of the week's top stories from the BATV News Desk. Stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Let's checking now with the BATV News Desk for more of the top stories that made news this week.
Thanks again, Camille. The embattled Managing Director of National Energy Solutions, NESOL, Carolyn Warren, has resigned. Mrs. Warren, who resigned on Wednesday, issued a statement explaining her decision to step down. In the statement, she said she decided to walk away from the position to avoid prolonging this unfortunate and deeply painful situation. The NESOL boss has been embroiled in controversy over the last few weeks. Her leadership was called into question after it was revealed during Parliament's latest Public Administration and Appropriations Committee PAAC sitting that the company was being mismanaged after several checks totaling millions of dollars were paid out, but projects were left incomplete. Additionally, it was revealed that Mrs. Warren did not disclose at the time she was hired as head of the company that she was convicted of a drug offense over 2 decades before. In her statement, the former NESOL boss said the allegations against her are false, adding that in many instances, the spurious attacks via social media and electronic media have taken a tremendous toll on her and her family. The statement went on to say that the issues surrounding her has cast a cloud over the good work which has been taking place at NESOL. As gas prices hit the highest ever, opposition members are urging the government to seriously consider canceling the tax on gasoline that was used to pay for an oil hedge in 2006. The hedge would have protected Jamaicans from a sharp increase in oil prices, but the JLP administration decided to discontinue it last year. Speaking in Parliament on Tuesday, Mr. Paulwell, that's Philip Paulwell, pointed out that taxes make up some 50% of the cost of fuel sold by Petrojam. Jamila Maitland reports.
As gas prices continue to rise, opposition spokesman on energy Philip Paulwell is calling on the government to roll back taxes which it continues to collect for an oil hedge that no longer exists. The Portia Simpson Miller administration had increased the special consumption tax, SCT, on fuel by $7 a litre to pay for the hedge. Mr. Paulwell says gas prices are expected to continue increasing, which will negatively affect electricity, fuel prices, and cost of living for the ordinary Jamaican.
The price of gasoline is at its highest, even when we were experiencing price per barrel of oil of up to $150. Today it's about 70. But the price of fuel at the pump is now higher than then. What? Yes. And Mr. Speaker, it's a serious matter because it affects us not only as consumers, but as businesses. And we are going to see the reflection of this in inflation.
But Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark noted that according to Statin, the inflation rate at June 30 is only 2.8%. He says while gas prices do affect inflation, there are other factors that also contribute.
Inflation for the first 3 months of this year, for the first quarter of this year, was actually negative. The point of order is that you are inadvertently, I give you that credit, misleading the House to make a relationship between what may be movement in petrol prices and inflation. There may be some contribution, but the two are not the same.
But Mr. Paulwell is predicting gas prices will remain high for the summer. And he points out that taxes account for more than 40% of the cost of fuel sold by Petrojam. The information was revealed at a recent meeting of Parliament's Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. He says the government must protect consumers by rolling back the taxes.
The Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, recently conducted a study on deposit refund systems and whether or not they would work in Jamaica to reduce the number of plastic bottles which end up in the environment. The study revealed that while Jamaicans are willing to recycle plastic bottles for the right price, they're not willing to travel too far to do it. The findings of the study were released Wednesday at a Capri public forum held in Kingston. Javon Keys was there.
With 1 million bottles being produced per minute worldwide and 650 million bottles being produced annually in Jamaica, it is hoped that these systems will reduce the number of plastic bottles that end up discarded in the environment. Capri's Director of Sustainability, Dr. Susan Shaw, explained how the deposit refund systems work.
So a DRS would consist of your beverage manufacturers or importers. You'd also have your retailers through which the drinks, the plastic bottle drinks, would be channeled, your customers who would buy these drinks, and a central administrator that would oversee the logistics of the deposit refund system and essentially manage the financial aspects of it, do the accounting, and ensure that retailers and various players in the system are compensated for the costs that they incur.
The study looked at three main areas: the cost of implementing the systems, the benefits, and what is necessary to have them functioning. It also looked at three main deposit refund system structures.
The first one involves the consumer going to the supermarket. An employee at the supermarket would handle the returns. They'd count the bottles. They'll reimburse the consumer based on the number of bottles that they return. A transportation company comes and collects those bottles and takes them back to the processing center. The second model is very similar to the first in that the supermarket acts as a point of return and reimbursement, except that in this model, we're looking at an automated return system, the use of reverse vending machines, where consumers simply place their bottles within the machine automatically determines whether it's an eligible bottle that is participating in the DRS, and therefore counts the number of bottles and determines the deposit that must be refunded. And finally, the third model that we look at is the depot model. As I explained, it's a model which is currently in place for the collection and processing of PET bottles.
Of the three models, the depot model would be the most costly to operate. In the meantime, the study found that deposit refund systems can be self-funded, and the rate of finance recovery from investing in them can range from 25% within 3 years and 60% up to 10 years. It also found that even though persons would be willing to return their bottles for cash, they were not willing to travel more than 5 minutes to do so. The findings of the Capri study comes on the heels of the government's announcement earlier this year of an impending ban on single-use plastic items.
That's all the WBR news for this week. Camille, back to you.
Thanks so much. When we come back, we'll tell you why parents in Venezuela are abandoning their children. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. The economic crisis in Venezuela is forcing more parents to abandon their children. So as families flee, more children are being left behind.
She was left on the roadside in the Colombian border city of Cucuta with only this note from a Venezuelan woman, signed simply Catalina.
She was just so coldly abandoned. The mother wrote that she didn't have the means to take care of her.
Angela is now being cared for by a foster mother Authorities found no trace of a Catalina having just given birth. Over 1 million Venezuelans have fled across the border into Colombia in less than 2 years, escaping soaring inflation and an autocratic government. Colombian authorities say parents are increasingly abandoning children. The sisters at the city's biggest soup kitchen bear witness.
Mothers have told me, help me and at least take the older children so I can take care of the younger ones.
Many young Venezuelan children end up sleeping on the streets, suffering from malnutrition and even being lured into sex work. Over 500 of them have been taken into state care in Colombia since the start of 2017. Those still with their families often live around 10 to a single room, like 5-year-old Daniel Villegas.
It's uncomfortable. My back hurts a lot.
Some are anxious to leave Cucuta for more prosperous cities. This family's headed for Peru, 2,400 kilometers away. The father fled Venezuela after losing his job and being kidnapped.
I'm willing to work for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it takes.
Colombian officials say they're trying to keep migrant families together while boosting the number of foster parents available to step in when needed. Though Colombia's already stretched child welfare system is struggling to cope with the influx.
And that's our show for this week. On behalf of the entire Weekend Business Report team, I'm Keneal. See you next time.